found out about the affair on a Thursday. Not a dramatic Thursday. No storm, no ominous sign. Just a regular November afternoon in Sudbury, the kind where the sky goes grey by 3 o'clock and the cold settles into your joints before you've even taken your coat off. I had come home early from my doctor's appointment. Routine blood work, nothing serious. My wife's car was in the driveway, which was normal. She'd been working from home most days since she took the regional coordinator position with the insurance company. My son-in-law's truck was parked behind it, which was less normal. He lived 40 minutes away in Chelmsford, and it was a Tuesday. I mean Thursday. I keep saying Tuesday because in my mind, something that ordinary feeling should have happened on a Tuesday. I didn't think anything of it at first. I just maybe the truck needed a jump and he borrowed my wife's cables and stayed for coffee. That's the kind of man I was at 63. Still finding the innocent explanation first. I came in through the side door, the one off the laundry room that I always used because I'd lived in that house for 31 years and habits don't die. I set my keys on the hook. I heard voices upstairs. Not loud voices, quiet ones. The kind of voices people use when they don't want to be heard. I stood at the bottom of the stairs for a long time. I don't know exactly how long. Long enough that my coat got heavy on my shoulders and I didn't take it off. I went back out. I sat in my truck for 45 minutes in my own driveway. And then I drove to my daughter's apartment on Paris Street and knocked on her door. She opened it, took one look at my face and said, "Dad, come in. I'll put the kettle on." She already knew. She had known for 2 months. That was the moment that cracked me open more than anything else. Not what I had seen, not what I had heard, but the fact that my daughter had been carrying this alone for 8 weeks, protecting me, waiting, trying to figure out what to do. She was 29 years old and she had been holding a secret that would have destroyed most adults, all while still showing up to Sunday dinners and asking her stepmother how work was going. Her name is not important. What's important is that she's the best person I know, and she had married a man who was sleeping with my wife. Her husband, I'll call him what he was, my son-in-law, had met my wife 4 years earlier at the wedding. He was 34. She was 58. He was charming the way some men are charming when they want something from you. Not flashy, not obvious, quiet and attentive. He remembered things. He'd ask about your golf knee, your retirement timeline, your opinion on the Leafs. He made you feel listened to. I liked him. God help me, I liked him. My wife and I had been married for 11 years, second marriage for both of us. I had 2 kids from my first, my daughter and my son who lives out in Kelowna now. She didn't have children. We had built something that felt stable, even good. A house we paid off together, investments, a shared retirement plan that included a place near Georgian Bay we'd been talking about for years. I thought we were in the same story. I wasn't. I was a chapter in someone else's. I sat in my daughter's apartment that Thursday evening, and she walked me through what she knew. She had gone to drop off a birthday gift at our house in September, early, before I was home from work. She had her own key. She had walked in, heard something, and gone upstairs without thinking. She didn't say much about what she saw. She didn't need to. What she said was, "I threw up in your bathroom, and then I drove home and I didn't know what to do." She hadn't told her husband she knew. She had kept her face smooth at every family dinner, watched the 2 of them interact in the kitchen while I loaded the dishwasher, and said nothing. She said she needed time to understand what was happening. Whether it was a one-time thing or something more. Whether they were in love or in something worse than love. She had started to pay attention. What she found, slowly, through careful observation and one very careful conversation with my son over the phone, he hadn't known either, not until she told him, was that this was not just an affair. My son-in-law had started asking questions about my retirement savings, not casually, specifically. He had asked my wife, apparently, whether I had a will, whether she was on my accounts, whether I had ever thought about transferring the cottage property before I died to save on probate costs. He was 34 years old, asking about probate costs. My daughter looked at me across her kitchen table and said, "Dad, I think this started because he saw an opportunity." I didn't want to believe that. I wanted to believe it was just stupidity and lust, the ordinary catastrophe of it, because that I could grieve and eventually survive. The other version, that my son-in-law had looked at me and seen a 63-year-old man with a paid-off house and an RRSP and a wife he trusted completely and thought, there's something I can work with. That's something I can work with. That version made me feel like a fool in a way I had no language for. My daughter refilled my tea. She put her hand over mine on the table. She said, "We're not going to let them take anything from you, but you need to let me and your son help, and you cannot go home tonight and confront her. Not yet." I wanted to. I wanted to walk back into that house and say what I knew. I'm a man who has always believed in directness. I spent 30 years as a site supervisor for a construction company in Northern Ontario, and you don't manage tradespeople in January without learning how to say hard things plainly. Silence felt like lying. It felt like weakness. My daughter squeezed my hand. She said, "You confronting her tonight gets you nothing. You confronting her in 3 weeks, after we've talked to someone, gets you everything." She was right. She was smarter than me about this. I knew it then, and I know it more now. I slept on her couch that night. I told my wife I'd gone to my buddy Ted's place in Lively after the appointment, that we'd had a few and I didn't want to drive. She sent back a thumbs-up emoji, that was all. The next morning, I called my son. He had already spoken to his sister. He was furious in the way that quiet people get furious. Very still, very certain. He said, "Dad, whatever you need, tell me what to do." He had a contact in Kelowna, a family law, a woman he trusted. She referred us to someone in Sudbury. The lawyer's name was not someone I would have found on my own. She was efficient and unsentimental, and she asked me questions I hadn't thought to ask myself. She wanted to know exactly what assets were in joint names, what was solely mine, whether my wife had signing authority on any of my accounts, whether there had been any unusual transactions in the last year. There had been one. A transfer of $4,000 in August from a joint account to a personal account in my wife's name. My wife had said it was for a family gift, her sister's milestone birthday. I had not questioned it. I was very tired of being a man who did not question things. Over the next 2 weeks, I moved carefully. The lawyer advised me on what I could and could not do. I separated certain assets quietly and legally. I documented what I had. I contacted my financial advisor, a man I'd worked with for 12 years out of the Raymond James office on Elm Street, and I made changes to my accounts that were mine to make. I was not hiding anything. I was simply, finally, paying attention to what was mine. My daughter continued to go to Sunday dinners. She sat across from her husband, and she passed him the bread, and she asked him how work was going. And every Sunday night she called me from her car in the parking lot of our church 2 blocks away, and we talked through what she'd seen and heard. She never broke, not once. I don't know how she did it. My son-in-law, in this period, came by our house twice. Once supposedly to help me with the gutter issue. I had mentioned it in passing at a dinner 2 months earlier, which told me he was listening more carefully than I'd realized. Once to drop off a bottle of whiskey for no stated reason, which I accepted and put in the back of the pantry and did not open. He was still performing the role. The attentive son-in-law. The good husband. He would catch my wife's eye across the room sometimes, and I watched it, now that I was watching, and I understood what I was seeing. He thought he was patient. He thought they were patient. They were waiting for something. The next step in whatever plan had a next step. I was also waiting. I had gotten better at it. The moment came on a Saturday in December, 3 weeks after that Thursday in November. My daughter had suggested we host a family dinner at my house. Just immediate family, nothing large. Me, my wife, my daughter, her husband, and a video call with my son in Kelowna. A normal Saturday dinner. Roast chicken. My wife made her usual scalloped potatoes. I had, with the advice of my lawyer, prepared a document. A straightforward summary of certain account changes I have made, certain properties now clarified in title, certain investments now solely in my name, all things that were legally and unambiguously mine to manage. I had also written a letter, not angry, not dramatic, just true. We ate dinner. My wife had made her scalloped potatoes, which I had always loved, and I ate them, and I noticed I felt nothing particular about eating them, which told me something about where I had arrived. After dinner, my son appeared on the laptop screen we propped on the counter. My daughter sat across the table. Her husband sat beside her, relaxed the way you are when you think the room is yours. I set the documents on the table. I said calmly that I knew about the affair. I said it plainly, the way you say something you've rehearsed until it no longer costs you anything to say it. I looked at my wife. I looked at my son-in-law. I gave them nothing to respond to, not tears, not rage, just a statement of fact. My wife said my name. Just my name. My son-in-law said nothing. He reached for my daughter's hand. She moved her hand to her lap. I told them I had been to see a lawyer. I told them what I had documented and what I had changed and what remained. I told my son-in-law that I thought he was a smart man, that I had thought so from the beginning, and that a smart man might want to understand the situation he was actually in before making any decisions. The situation he was actually in was that he had an affair with his wife's stepmother, and that the financial picture he may have had in mind had changed considerably, and that my daughter and my son were aware of everything and had been helpful to me in ways I was grateful for. My daughter did not look at her husband during this. She looked at me. My son on the screen said nothing. He didn't need to. There was a long silence. My wife started to speak. Something that began as a denial and shifted mid-sentence into something closer to an apology, though it never quite got there. My son-in-law stood up from the table. He said he needed some air. He went to the front door, and I heard it open, and I did not hear it close, for a very long time. My daughter got up and came around the table and put her arms around me from behind, the way she used to when she was small. She didn't say anything, she just stayed there for a moment. The marriage ended in the way these things end. Not in one dramatic moment, but in a series of smaller endings, paperwork and phone calls, and a house that slowly emptied of another person's things. The separation was finalized the following autumn. The division of assets was what my lawyer described as reasonable, given the documentation. The Georgian Bay property remained mine. The joint accounts were divided as they should have been. My wife moved back to Thunder Bay, where her sister lived. I don't know where my son-in-law is now. My daughter filed for divorce that spring. She handled it with the same composure she had brought to everything else. There is a thing that happens when a betrayal is this layered, when it isn't just the personal wound, but also the practical one, when you realize someone looked at your life and saw something to take, where the grief doesn't stay grief. It becomes something harder and more useful, not bitterness, clarity. You start to understand exactly who was in your corner, and you find that the list is shorter than you thought it was, and also more than enough. My son flew in from Kelowna for a week that following spring. We drove up to the property on Georgian Bay on a Friday afternoon, just the two of us, and we sat on the dock in the cold, with our coffees, because neither of us is the kind of man who waits for decent weather to sit on a dock. He said, "You doing okay?" I said I was getting there. He nodded. That was enough for us. My daughter came up the following weekend with a friend, and I made the roast chicken because it turns out the food doesn't belong to the people who let you down. It was mine to begin with. We ate on the porch with the lake going silver in the evening, and my daughter laughed at something her friend said, and I thought, there it is, there's what I was protecting. I am 64 years old, and I live alone in a house I have known for 31 years, and I am the most clear-eyed I have ever been. I was not a victim, though what happened to me was a real harm. I was a man who was slow to see, and then I saw, and then I did what needed doing. That is not a small thing. In the end, it is almost everything. There's a thing I keep coming back to. Sitting here in this house that still smells like the same wood and the same cold winter air it always has. What happened to me didn't begin the day I found that truck in the driveway. It began much earlier. In every moment I chose convenience over clarity. Every time I accepted the easy explanation because the true one was too uncomfortable to hold. I was a man who prided himself on reading people. 30 years on construction sites will teach you that, or so I thought. And yet I missed it entirely, not because I was foolish, but because I had stopped paying the kind of attention that cost something. That's the part that stayed with me longest. Not the betrayal itself, but the asking. How does a person of decent character end up so completely in the dark about his own life? I think the honest answer is that good character alone isn't enough. My son-in-law was counting on exactly that, on me being a fair-minded, trusting, non-confrontational man who would not look too closely at the books, who would not question the $4,000 transfer, who would take the whiskey and say thanks and never wonder why it was offered. Decency without discernment is a door left unlocked. My daughter understood something I hadn't. She understood that knowing the truth wasn't enough, that you had to think clearly about what to do with it, and that acting too fast, too raw, too emotionally was exactly the outcome they would have benefited from. She was 29 years old, and she held that weight for 8 weeks and made no mistakes. That kind of clear-headedness in the middle of grief, that's not luck. That's something a person builds in themselves, quietly, over time. I look at her and I think, I did something right somewhere, even if I did a lot else wrong. What the two of them didn't count on was that I had people, not many, my daughter, my son calling in from Kelowna, a lawyer I'd never met, who asked better questions than I had. That was enough. The thing about trying to isolate someone, to position yourself as the helpful one, the trusted one, is that it only works if the person actually is isolated. I wasn't. I just hadn't needed to lean on anyone in a long time, so it looked like I was standing alone. I didn't take any pleasure in the way it ended. That surprises people when I say it. They expect me to feel like I won something. But what I felt more than anything was tired, and then, slowly, lighter. The Georgian Bay property is mine. The accounts are clear. My daughter laughed on that porch in the evening light, and I thought, that's what I was holding on to. Not the assets, not the outcome. That laugh. What I'd say to anyone going through something like this is not to let the wound make you smaller. Don't become someone who trusts no one. Don't become hard, but do become someone who pays attention, who asks the quiet question, who looks at what's actually in front of them and not just what they want to see. Integrity without awareness is just vulnerability with a good reputation. The goal isn't to be suspicious of everyone. The goal is to know yourself well enough and your life well enough that you notice when something has shifted. I'm 64. I have a dock on Georgian Bay and 2 kids who showed up when it mattered. That's not a small life. That is, in fact, the whole thing.